Welcome to Powered by Authenticity. It's a live recording tonight, and I just happen to love those because it's so much fun to get to interact and answer questions as they come up. And my guest tonight is perfect for this because, oh gosh, Scott Lewis, you're just an amazing person. And I'm so excited that you've joined us on the podcast tonight.
Oh, Stop. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how is it going?
It's terrific. It's been a lovely rainy day, so I didn't have to feel guilty being in the office all day.
Yeah, it was cool here too. I don't know about
Yeah,
where you are.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for once.
I it's been such a brutal summer, like, just brutally hot.
I've given up on my lawn.
Me too. Me too. Well, I appreciate you being here tonight, and, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I identify as a Canadian and an engineer. And although I became a U.S. citizen 3 years ago, I've been here in the U.S. for 33 years. Um, So like I say, I identify as Canadian and an engineer. I also, as a straight white male, and apparently, according to the pancake box I used last weekend, also a family of four. So uh, I don't know who they think they're feeding with those things, but anyway, as I say, I came down here uh, 33 years ago for what I thought was going to be 2 years, and I'm still here. Her name is Joni, and she wants to live in Newton, and I'd like to live in back to Vancouver. So we compromise, and we live in Groton, Massachusetts, which is as far west as a Boston native is going to go. It's outside of 495, and it's a lovely place, and we're happy here. Um, I came here to run a little company called North Star, which made navigation equipment for boats and airplanes. And I'm a pilot and a sailor, so that was like asking a 10-year-old to work in a candy store, and it was just a delight. So that was a wonderful 10 years. And during that time, I I joined a group, a peer group called Vistage, and I was a member for 10 years, and I got so much out of it.
Mhm.
So that gave me a grounding in what I do now. We'll get into that a little bit um, more down the road, but um, I can't say enough about that experience, and the whole North Star experience was terrific. Um, and We eventually sold that to Brunswick, who you'll probably think of as being, bowling alleys and pool tables, but they also are the biggest, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, marine manufacturer in the
Oh,
U.S.
really?
They own a whole bunch of boat brands and Mercury Marine. And so their idea was that they would put the GPS that we built into the boats in the factory, which I thought was a bad idea, and it turned out to be, but it wasn't my decision anymore. So um, that's how I ended up in the consulting world, and then I did a couple of turnarounds, and and then I met a fellow who had started a group called the CEO Roundtable,
Mhm.
and he started that in 1996, and he was having some health issues, and so I bought the roundtable from him in 2017. And it's just I thought it was going to be a retirement project, but
Yeah.
never works like that. So so that's how I got into that business.
That's amazing. Alright, and you're enjoying it?
I love it. It's such gratifying work. My role has evolved. Um, I don't have as direct contact with the groups anymore. I used to facilitate them all.
Mhm.
When we had three, that was okay, and then we had four, and that was a little tougher, and then with five, it is impossible. So
Yeah.
fortunately, I've got some great facilitators that run the meetings, and I get to do what is kind of a dream job. I get to talk to interesting people all day and curate the groups, find new people for the existing groups and for new groups that we might grow.
That's cool. That's amazing. Well, I'm glad that you found that, and, we're glad that you found us here in the States as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So you were in Vancouver before you moved to
Yeah,
okay.
I started my first business in Vancouver. I had great mentors, and I started a business there with a fellow named Alan Crawford, who interviewed me out of school, and his comment after the interview to the guy that was in the room with him was, "Well, he's either really good or he's full of shit. Either way, I think we should hire him." And he's still around. He's 95 now, and he's out in Vancouver. And so when I talk to him, I say, "So Al, which was it?" And he just grins. But he was the absolute gold standard visionary founder. Just he had a million great ideas for businesses,
Yeah,
and I think he directly founded a dozen or so. The spinouts of all of those businesses that he founded, probably 30 or so.
yeah,
Um, so I'm very happy to be associated with him and the group that he put me in contact with.
yeah. Awesome. Well, that's so great. Well, it's so fun getting to know you, and as part of getting to know you on a personal level, we do have an icebreaker question.
Right.
And we love to talk about food and coffee and all those things. So, if any favorite coffee shop anywhere in the world? Like, when you think of coffee shops, is there one that pops into the mind?
Well, there's when I moved to Massachusetts, I had to learn a new language, and there was a little independent coffee shop, a little. I think it used to be a signal hut along the railroad in Concord, Massachusetts, and it was run by a couple of lovely ladies. And first time I went in there, I ordered a coffee, and what kind of coffee would you like? And I said, I'd like a regular coffee, please. So I didn't want hazelnut, and I didn't want pumpkin spice or whatever, and I just wanted a regular coffee. Well, I got the coffee, and it had cream and sugar in it. I said, this had cream and sugar in it. And she said, well, you ordered a regular coffee. I said, no, I wanted black.
Yeah.
Well, regular coffee in Massachusetts is cream and two sugars. And that's not what I want. So I said, I'd like a black coffee. So she poured me a black coffee and gave it to me. And I said, this had sugar in it. She said, well, you don't want sugar? I said, no. She said, well, you should have asked for black, no sugar.
No.
So, along with that and a bunch of other little, brown bread is not what we call it in Canada. It's
Yep.
wheat bread. So
Yep. Yep.
I had to learn.
Well, that's true. I thought you were gonna ask for a double-double and get, black coffee or something.
Well, that's a Canadian thing now, and obviously Tim Hortons is the big thing there. And honestly, I don't much care for Tim Hortons coffee, but I can still be a Canadian.
Absolutely. You can still wear your badge.
Yeah.
All right, producer Ken, how's it going tonight?
Going all right.
Okay, we wanna hear about a favorite coffee shop of yours.
Oh, if I'm just grabbing beans, I do like Finger Lake Coffee Roasters up in Rochester. But one of my favorites to go to, it's kind of an oddball off the beaten path, is Vertical Cafe down in Warsaw.
Oh.
Wow.
They have a nice little, they have a full espresso bar and everything, and they do just a great lunch in there.
Oh, alright.
Yeah.
I've never been there. I'll have to go. Warsaw's a very tiny town locally, but, yeah. Oh. Awesome. Well, I've got 2 when I think of it. So I've got one, Scott, you're familiar with Canada, so, Muskoka region. Have you
Oh
been
yeah.
to Muskoka region? Yep, there's a little cute little coffee shop called Oliver's in Gravenhurst, and, their
Oh, nice.
great. And, then here in town, it'd be Coffee Press, and, that's kind of got, like, a newspaper feel to it, so it's just really cute to kinda go, and I love to write there, like, it's very, creative space. So,
Nice. Those quirky little places, the independent places, I do love. We've just got Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. Actually, there's a Cafe Nero around here.
yeah.
Kind of nice, but in a good place to go and think and work.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks for letting us get to know you. I personally drink my coffee black as well, just
Yeah,
straight,
other
nothing
way. Right. No other way.
That's right. All right. So I would love you hinted upon a little bit around CEO Roundtable, but tell us more about it. Tell us about your role and kind of how the organization works.
Yeah. So, the notion is, um, you put people with a common interest in a room and lock the door. And I mean, that means high
Yep.
confidentiality. So what is said in the room stays in the room. And when you have sort of the ultimate authority in a business or any kind of situation, if your desk is the one on which the buck stops, often you'll get a situation where you haven't dealt with this before, you don't have any background in this thing, and where do you turn? Who do you talk to?
Yep.
And if you're running a business, you can't talk to your employees really. You can't talk to your board if you have a board or investors. You could talk to your family. Your spouse would probably give you good advice, but you won't listen. So it's a good idea to find somebody to talk to.
Mhm.
And there was a book written a number of years ago by two guys that ran Vistage for a time, and it's called The Power of Peers. I don't think it's in print anymore, but uh, uh, Leo Botteri and Lynn Shapiro, I think, are the authors, The Power of Peers. And it talks about that. It talks about find something. And it could be a coffee clutch at your favorite coffee place on Tuesday mornings, or it could be some kind of a networking group, although I'll talk about the difference between networking and peer groups.
Yeah.
Or it could be a full, formal peer experience with Vistage, which is expensive. That's the only bad thing I've got to say about them. But or an independent group like ours.
Yeah.
So we get to talk about things that you can't talk about with others. You get to talk about how you feel about things, and we can talk about that a little bit more. You don't have the luxury of doing that in
Yep.
other business venues. And in fact, men of my age have been trained not to pay attention to the way we feel.
Mm-hmm.
One of my dad's favorite lines was, "I'll give you something to cry about." And we're just not trained to be in touch with the way we feel about things. So, like I say, we can get into that a little bit further down the road, but a peer experience of some kind, I think, is absolutely critical to being in a situation where you don't have, if you can say the words "my boss,"
Mm-hmm.
you probably don't need a peer group
Right.
because you can kick a big problem upstairs. But then, what does your boss do with it?
Yeah.
So that's the notion of a peer group. We get to know one another very well.
Mm-hmm.
We get to recognize one another's tells, in the
Yep.
gambling sense. So if we're not telling the whole story or not admitting the whole thing to ourselves, we can help one another draw that out. There's absolutely tactical things like who do you use for a CPA, or
Yeah.
how did you fill out that form for a grant or whatever. There's tactical things. There's strategic things, of course.
Yep.
And then, as we say, there's these emotional things.
Interesting.
And the reason that that's so important is that we act on what we feel, not on what we think.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have a straight path to our feelings, we might not do the things that we need to do, or we might do things that we shouldn't do because of not being in contact with how we feel about things.
Yeah. I think, and that's probably really true for somebody who's in a new leadership position, who's never held the role before and doesn't quite know what to do with certain things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. And although I find that the people that resonate the best with the peer group concept are a little bit older.
Mhm.
And, not because young people can't use it. I think it was Mike Tyson that said everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face. And, somebody around 45 has been punched in the face a couple of times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they realized they could use some help. And so they're the ones that tend to look for peer groups. They're people that understand they don't know everything.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of very smart young people out there. And I was one that felt like I knew everything
Yeah.
until I realized I didn't.
Yeah.
So, and the biggest objection to people doing something like this is, oh, I don't have time. And I'd like to be blunt about it. I'd like to tell them, well, that's like saying you're too sick to go to the doctor.
Right. Yeah, because when something goes wrong, you're gonna find the time to have to fix it.
Yeah, and it will go wrong.
Yep.
And if you could find a shortcut that somebody else has found to solve that problem, you just freed up a whole bunch of time.
Yep. Yeah. The other question I just thought of this is that, I would imagine especially now, so there's a lot of people who, like myself, went through a layoff and was faced with the decision of, do I go work for somebody else or do I spin up my own company that I've been thinking about for a while? And, I think more and more you're seeing people make the decision to go out on their own and to try to grow something versus going to work for somebody else. So I would think these peer groups would become really relevant and important to that group of individuals like myself who are like, I'm just going to go do it. And when you say that, there's a whole bunch of situations, like me now, I'm growing and onboarding people and I'm like, oh wow, there's a whole world that the HR department used to take care of for me. It's like, okay, so having a peer group like yourself would be so valuable.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and not just from, as I said, a tactical point of view, like how did
Yeah.
you handle that? When did you bring on your HR manager? How did you compensate them? How did you manage them?
Yeah.
Just day-to-day stuff like that. But then there's and I keep coming back to this aspect of it. There's nobody to tell you you're doing a good job,
Very true.
and you feel like, well, I made that mistake, and you focus on those things, the things you did wrong. And so it's really nice to hear that somebody else feels the same way,
Hmm.
or here's how I dealt with that. I dealt with that feeling well, anyway, it's nice to be able to commiserate with other people who are doing the same thing, aside from all the tips and tricks you can get from what they've experienced. So yes, it's a good place for new business people. It doesn't come without cost.
Yep.
And that looks like a big, sometimes a big number to a startup. I don't think I've ever had anybody, and I'll say our group doesn't have a contract,
Right.
and our average tenure is something between 5 and 7 years. So
Oh,
people
wow.
get value
Yeah.
from it, and if they don't get value, they stop coming. So I'm proud of that, but it's just part of the formula. That people do get value once they start coming. It takes a little while to get connected and to get to know the group and to get the value of the group. But once they do, it's just a deep well of help and support and knowledge. You get to focus the experience and intellect of 10 other people
Yep.
on your issue. And then you get to listen to them talk about their issues that you might not even have thought about.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, that's a problem that I'm about to step in,
Yeah. Yeah.
or an opportunity that I didn't even think of.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine the brainstorming, like, when you think about strategic direction for companies as well, like, being able to listen to what your peer group is thinking about from, new growth, new revenue, new directions that you could grow within. I know I'll listen to somebody like, whoa, I never even thought about that. Good for you. Like that is, but now you've got my juices flowing. How
Yeah.
can I pivot that for my own company?
Yeah.
So that has to be an amazing like aha moment for people in these groups.
It is. And on the flip side, often somebody will say, well, here's what I'm planning to do. And somebody in the group will say, you're going to do what? And where do you get that? Where else do you get that? That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Get right off that and come back and tell us when you've thought it through. I mean, it's not done rudely like that, but but it's done directly. And I don't know how many lives we've saved or businesses we've saved.
Yeah.
Just somebody saying, oh, that's a really stupid idea. Where'd that come from?
Yep.
Or like I say, we'll try to knock the stupid out of a new idea before you have to implement it.
And there's just such value in that. There's days where I'm sitting there and I'm like, I just, you got this idea, but how, what would others think of it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very cool. What are some of the topics that you're seeing people, leadership kind of grapple with right now? Is it things like return to office? So what are some of those things that you're just seeing out in the industry?
Yeah, it's always hard to put a nail in what it is, what the main issue is, because there is such a broad range of things, and every company is going through a different thing at different times, and the environment affects different companies in different ways, which is a good thing, because now you can hear about, well, how are you surviving in this environment?
Mm-hmm.
The two things that do rise to the top right now, I think AI,
Yeah.
how that's going to play out. Everybody's using it for this or that, or writing job descriptions or what have you. And many of our members are using it as agents and using it more deeply than others of us. So that's probably a big concern. And we've had a number of panel discussions and experts come in and talk to us about what's happening now. I don't think anybody can say what's going to happen in 5 years or 2 years, for that matter.
I agree.
So that's a worry. That's some uncertainty. Just there's a lot of uncertainty around things like tariffs and biotech funding. Right now, the biotech business is just in turmoil.
Yeah.
And so one of my groups is a biotech group.
Okay.
And most of those people are struggling because they really don't know where their next funding is going to come from.
Yeah.
So those are probably the three common issues.
Yeah. I think AI, is top of mind for everybody. How are you going to use it? How are you, my thing is, how are you going to govern it? You just can't put it into an environment and be okay. There's things that have to go with that. So, I think that the other thing, and I think this blends into what my next train of thought was that I wanted to talk to you about are, AI is one thing, and it's going to be part of organizations, but what does that do for being able truly to bring in that emotional connection with your employees? I think more that we augment with AI, we're going to have a lost art form of being able to connect and, draw feelings into the way that we're leading and helping to grow our organization. So how do you see that playing a part, making sure that we're tucking in and always, staying close and managing with that level of feeling and connection? And I do think AI is going to deviate from that, right? Like it's very clinical, but what about that emotional piece of leadership?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because there's three. I just read an article this morning that talked about three kinds of jobs. There's jobs that make things, manufacturing jobs. There's jobs that are smart jobs, like lawyers and engineers and thinking jobs. And the Industrial Revolution took a lot of the manufacturing jobs away. This AI is going to take a lot of the smart jobs away, the thinking jobs. And the third kind of job is caring jobs. Nurses and doctors and people in nursing homes and so on. So AI probably can't do a very good job of those. So we're going to have to get better at doing that and better at adding that feature to what AI can do. Having said that, I've had some chats with ChatGPT or Claude who that feel very emotional. That feel, I can say things to them that I can't say to another person, and they will come back very directly, and so who knows how that's going to play out.
Yeah, because I do feel more now than ever that, and I don't know if it was because of the pandemic or what, but I do feel like leadership needs to be able to connect and show their emotional side. Like it's, not the anger, not, some other aspects, but really be able to let their team members see that they're humans. And a big part of leading with that type of connection to your employees is having them see that you do show emotion. If something happens, that okay, I'm feeling it with you. I think when some of my past leaders, they were so just stoic, and if something happened, they didn't allow themselves to feel it. They probably did when they went home, but I think there's such value. It bring again, it allows you as a leader to be connected to people, and I think we're losing that a little bit.
Yeah, and this kind of interface where we're just here to do business, and when we interact with our staff that is just on the screen or just business oriented, we lose a lot of that. When we were in the office all the time, we used to go out for lunch, or we go for pizza and beer, after work, or some kind of activity, and get to know one another as people. We don't have as much of that now as we used to. So we need to find ways to connect as people. Early on in the pandemic, Patrick Lencioni, who's one of my favorite business authors, is my favorite business author, not one of them. He suggested that we just turn on Zoom with a workmate and not have an agenda, just work together.
Yeah.
If we think of something, say it. If we don't, just be quiet and but be together. I don't know of any. I tried it a couple of times. It really doesn't work that well. But at least he was trying to solve that kind of problem.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause again, I think it's just, especially as you grow and you advance in your leadership career, to be able to always stay connected at what's happening. I mean, it's really hard to, be there every day and talk to every single person every day, but to just be able to connect, I think on a level is just, I think it's just so important. And I really do think that a lot of times people feel that that's almost like a weakness, to be able to go out and shake hands and know what's happening across the organization, when in reality, that's a culture driver. Like that's a culture that people aren't going to want to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to feel guilty about that. I'd be at my desk and I'd get frustrated, and things weren't going right. And so I'd just get up and I'd go and walk around,
Yeah.
and it was good for me. And I just love talking to people on the floor, manufacturing or distribution or something, and they're doing the work, and they can tell you what could be better, and how what's wrong. And oftentimes they're not willing to do that. If you might be 2 or 3 or 4 levels above them in sort of the hierarchy, and they're all scared about. I just love talking to people at the shipping dock and say, well, why don't we put that over there so it's closer? And absolutely, go do it. And
Yep. Yeah. There's so much to learn.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. There's so much value there.
yeah. And back to the peer group. value, and going back to this feelings issue, when you are in that position, they say it's lonely at the top, and yeah, boo-hoo, the boss is lonely. Well, yeah, but it's a problem.
Mhm.
You're among a bunch of people, but you're isolated.
Yep.
And so, our tagline is, it doesn't have to be lonely at the top. You can find other people in that situation to commiserate with and to talk to. And then there's fear. I mean, you're driving the ship, and you don't know what's ahead. There might be storms or rocks or whatever, but there's fear and anxiety. And how do you deal with that?
Yep.
You can't show that.
Yep.
That's, you mentioned stoic. Well, that you kind of have to be stoic in that respect. This is the direction we're going, and everybody's going to follow me, and let's go. But holy cow, what if it doesn't work? So how do you deal with that?
Yep. It's a lot to bear. And then, I think the problem I've seen recently is people are trying to just make it a consensus type of leading, and that doesn't go anywhere either. It's great to brainstorm, but at some point you just have to be the decision maker. You just have to stand up and realize this might not be the right decision, but you're going with what you know, but you're at least taking a direction.
Yep. Yep. It's better to go in the wrong direction than to not to go.
Yeah, I see a lot of this, a lot of spinning.
Mm.
Well, this is awesome. I one other question, coaching. So, peer networking is in, being together in that group. But what about coaching? Like, how important do you think that is, even if you started to get yourself up to that CEO level? Like, how do you think that plays an everyday part for somebody?
Yeah. Again, it's critical. If I would say in order, well, I won't put any order on it. A dear friend is an EOS implementer, and she says every company should have an operating system, a peer group, and a coach.
I love that.
And so if you can do all three, do all three. I would say if you can't do all three, do a peer group. But
Yeah.
of course, um, I was talking to a guy a couple of years ago, and he really got it. I was expounding the virtues of a peer group, and he said, "Yeah." He said, "I get it. It's hard to read the label from inside the jar."
Oh, all right. That's
And
perfect.
yeah, and we get this perception of what we look like and what we're doing and how we're trying to come across.
Yeah.
And if we don't have a coach or somebody on the outside that's feeding that back to us and say, you really look like a jerk doing that, or you'd be better off if you did it this way, or appeared that way, that's invaluable.
Yep.
As we can't get a good picture of how we present or how we look to others, or how our intentions are interpreted,
Yep.
unless somebody else is telling us. So
Yep.
a coach or a peer group can do that. A coach does that one-on-one, and they're great for that particular purpose. So I think it's hugely important.
Yep. Yeah, I think some of my the other thing is, that word coaching can be so large, but what I think I love for people to realize is that even if you just pick up the phone and you ask somebody who you really respect and value, this is a situation I'm facing, that can be a coaching moment, right? Like that can be an opportunity. So I think there's such value in finding those that are out there that you just have that highest level of respect for, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a a stamped time commitment, but just a relationship that you're going to get truth out of when you go. You're going to get value, and I think that's just it from both sides. Like there's just something so rewarding about that too.
Yeah, and sometimes in business, coaching seems like a weakness. It's like remedial math or something.
Yeah.
But and I'll get some pushback here, but Tom Brady was the best quarterback in the league.
Oh, we did not hear that.
Yeah, but he still had a coach.
Yeah.
So we expect it in that field of endeavor. Why don't we expect it in ours?
Actually, for me, that's a great analogy, because I'm a huge football fan, and I guess I never really stopped to think about it that way. The Tom Brady's, the Josh Allens, they still have a coach that they have to go to, and they're learning from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's so amazing. Um, what is one thing that you would like our listeners to know about CEO Roundtable?
Well, it's one of many options, and these independent groups like this
Yeah.
all have their own character, and this has a character that is a little laid back. It's almost performative. Our meetings, we come in with an agenda, but it's a framework, and we talk about things that are top of mind, and we have the space to talk about those things that come up during the meeting. Other groups like this are much more structured, and they won't entertain an issue unless it's been written down and presented to everybody in advance so that they can think it over and respond to it. Both are good. I don't think we don't have time to do both.
Yeah.
So my point here is that find one of these groups that fits with your style. I'll interview somebody who's very regimented, and they would fit better with a more regimented style where every issue is presented as a case study. People earlier on in their business, perhaps, or just their character, if they're quick and able to think on their feet, then this is a better group for them. And I'm not saying that people who aren't quick and not able to are bad, but there are other groups for them. So there's a wide variety. When I bought this from Lauren Carlson, I looked around and said, "Where's my peer group?" And there wasn't one. So I formed one, and we cleverly call it Peer Squared because it's a peer group of peer group. And we meet every month, and it's a bunch of independent groups around the country. We've even got international groups now. And we talk about issues that are common to us.
Yeah.
It's very gratifying. But through that, I see each of those groups has its own personality, its own character. So if you've tried a roundtable or a peer group before and you didn't like it, look for another one. There's lots of different models out there. And if it's not a peer group, then a coffee clutch is fine.
Yeah. I think something that you said there can be said for so many things is that, what you want is it's not a cookie cutter thing, right? Like, don't go out there if the cookie cutter approach doesn't feel right, or if you find someone that's what it feels like and that doesn't exactly jive with you, there's options, and keep chatting. And I think that's one of the other benefits of, having these types of discussions is you get to learn what some of those options are and understand the value that should come with them, right? Like it's such a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important to find the right one. And even within our little, 5-group universe, sometimes we'll have somebody in one group that would be better off in another group. And why, I'm not quite sure, but they just fit better. Their personality is different, or fits better and over there. So we do some shuffling around every now and then.
Yeah. Well, that's good that you have that flexibility though too. So
yeah, some groups don't have that ability, but and we do have the one vertical group, which is biotech.
Mhm.
And I thought maybe it would be good to integrate those people with the rest.
Yeah.
I realized pretty quickly that no, they live in a different world. Too many zeros.
I can appreciate that. Well, how about what's one thing that you want to make sure you share with everybody about yourself?
Oh, as little as I like to talk about myself, I went through most of my career thinking I was an entrepreneur because I was always involved in startups. I never really fit in the corporate environment. So I was always, starting or growing a small business. But probably 15 or 20 years ago, I realized I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm an operational guy. And for a while, I felt bad about that. But then I realized, there's all kinds of examples of that. Whenever I had a successful startup, it was always somebody else's idea. I mentioned Al Crawford. He was, he was just a fountain of ideas, and here's the direction, and here's where we're going to go, and he would get people like me to turn the crank, and I loved that.
Yeah,
I love turning the crank. So it's okay to be an operational person in EOS terms, in the entrepreneurial operating system terms. That's an integrator versus a visionary.
yeah,
And so they recognize that. And very seldom is one person the one and not the other, or very seldom are they both.
yeah.
So and you can be analytical and you can be a jumper. I had a very dear friend who we got along great because he was a jumper, and I'd have to think about things. I'd do a spreadsheet, I'd sleep on it, and by the time I'm ready to do something, the opportunity has passed. But he would just do stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was his undoing, but he knew it, and he knew that that's how he was going to meet his end. But there's that balance, and I'm happy that I'm analytical. I'm happy that I'm a crank turner and an operational guy. It took me a while to figure that out.
Yep. Yep. That's awesome. Hey, the world needs that.
Well, it needs all kinds, right?
It does.
And if we have time for one more quick
Yeah,
story,
of course.
I when I sold the first business, we the company that bought us required that we go to a management training thing. It was a 5-day residential thing, way up in northern Ontario, near Atikokan. And by the time I put it off, I went kicking and screaming. It was January, so it was cold, and there were no cell phones, no internet, no, this was 1986. It wasn't like we had to ditch them. It was that they didn't exist. So I didn't think I needed that experience, but I'll tell you, it was transformational. And when you talk about needing every type,
Yeah.
there was one exercise we did. And our group of 6 had 3 engineers, 2 metallurgists, and a woman who was a housewife. And she was returning to the workforce, and she didn't feel like she belonged, and there were tears, and her husband wanted her to be there to, get this experience. And it was awkward. So we did this exercise, and we finished it. We're moving on to the next one, and Susan raised her hand. Bless her heart. She said, "What about?" And she raised an issue, and we said, "Nah, we got that. This is easy. We got this. We moved on." It hurts me to talk about this even now. This was almost 40 years later. And when we presented our result, and it mattered, that there was scoring and personal pride and stuff involved. We presented our result, and we were dead wrong. And Susan was right. And if we had listened, we would have had the benefit of her wisdom and her experience, and we didn't. And that hurts me to think about what we did to Susan and what we did to ourselves. And I don't go into a room today or a work situation without looking for Susan. Look for that other perspective that is 180 degrees from yours or vastly different than yours, and try to bring that into the mix. And when you do that, you get an outcome that is better than the best outcome that any individual in the group can have.
That's amazing advice. That is amazing advice.
So look for Susan.
We will look for Susan. That's great. And it's so true. Sometimes those, you get that direct opposite advice than what you're looking from, and it's exactly what you needed to hear.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just being open enough to accept it.
Yeah. Just look. Again, there was a one of those old films, 16 millimeter film that I remember seeing, and I can't find it online. And I'm going to post an article about it soon. But this guy put Jello in a pan, and he took it out of the fridge, and he put hot ink, tipped the pan up, and he put a hot ink along the top of the pan, and it ran down in little rivers, as you might expect, And he said, "This is how our mind works. And the next time we encounter this problem, this is what's going to happen." And he puts the ink along the same line, and it all runs down the same rivers. So if you want a different solution, you have to find a way to change the starting point, or a different way to tip the pan. And so that's tipping the pan is listening to Susan or listening to a peer group or whatever. It's a different way to tip the pan. And when you do that, new little rivers form. It's a different game altogether. And I read an article the other day about geography. If you're stuck on an issue, go somewhere else. Go, physically take yourself somewhere else and think about the problem. And that's another way to do it.
Yep. That's why I love my little coffee shops.
There you go. Back to the coffee shops.
Back to the coffee shops. Well, Scott, thank you so much. I loved it. We're going to remember to look for the Susans. I love that. And I love that you're still thinking about her today and bringing that into when you walk into a room. I think that's so important. So thank you for being here.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. The time goes very quickly, doesn't it?
The time goes by so fast. And the problem is conversations like this, I would just keep us going because I love them. But hey, producer Ken, question for you.
What's that?
What's the viewpoint from Ken's Corner tonight?
Well, we've got a fun fact tonight.
Okay. All right. We're going to hear some fun from Ken.
So we keep talking about coffee shops. We keep coming back to them. And I have something about a rather large coffee chain that I know you said you weren't too big of a fan of earlier. Mm-hmm. And you're in Massachusetts now, and that's Dunkin' territory. They're champion down there. But here in the Buffalo area, we love our Timmies. Good. And maybe that's because we have a connection to the hockey player. He played with the Sabres from 1972 to 73, and it was actually supposed to be on the team again the year he died. But his work helped take the Sabres to their first playoff run and in that 72 to 73 season. In fact, most of our local hockey teams, they have a Timbits level. That's how ingrained it is into our area. But the coffee chain we all know and love here was originally founded in Hamilton in 1964. But did you know there was actually a Tim Hortons before Tim Hortons?
No, I didn't.
So it was originally known as Tim Hortons Charbroiled Burgers, and it was located on Lakeshore Drive on the east side of Lake Nipissing, just outside of North Bay.
Wow, that is a fun fact.
So that's what we have over here tonight.
Yeah, and that location is actually my favorite restaurant on the planet now. It's called Churchill's. Yeah. So, yeah.
Lots of great history. I love little things like that. I'll try to get up to Lake Nipissing and visit Churchill's.
Yeah. You definitely should.
Great restaurant.
Yeah, come visit us along the way.
I'll do that. All right.
Well,
Yeah.
Oh no, I would absolutely love that actually. Well, thanks again for being here. We appreciate it, and thanks, Ken. I appreciate your help, and thanks for bringing Ken's Corner, and thanks to our friends at Circle the Wagon Foundation. They've been here to help us with growth along the way, and we're recording tonight, Scott, at Go Art. It's a community art center here in Batavia, and through the use of a grant, they allow us to use their podcast room, and they give about $300,000 a year to community organizations to host art projects and keep art alive in our community. So we're very lucky to be here.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for our conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I appreciate you being here tonight.
Oh, thank you, Emily. Keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And thanks. And to our listeners, thanks for being here. If it's your first time here, hey, thanks for joining us. If you've been here a while, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Have a good night, Scott. See ya.
Bye-bye.